Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here at NarraScope. This is my first time, in these conferences and presenting. So yeah, I'm pretty nervous, honestly, but I'm also very excited and very happy to present to you Berlin Passages, a Twine game I created for my master's in open design. This is a really meaningful project for me, and I'm very happy to share it with all of you. So without further ado, let's just begin. So I want to start with some questions. How do you people think we experience history? Do we read it, or do we watch it in films or documentaries, or do we find it exclusively in museums and classrooms? History is fundamentally narrative. It's organizing the complexity of human experience into a comprehensive sequence of events. In this way, it's pretty much like storytelling, or just any kind of story or novel. But here's the thing. Often we think history as something distant, as something that is separate from us in the past. So what if we could interact with it differently? What if we could play with it or even design it? To explain, let me talk a bit about my own story. So I'm June. And for as long as I can remember, I've always been drawn to stories, especially the ones from video games my sisters used to play, like Final Fantasy or Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger. I believe this natural attraction to stories is what led me to study history, where I developed my skills as a researcher. At the same time, I loved creative writing, and I went to electronic literature workshops where I learned to build my own Twitter poetic bot and to use Twine. And while I attended these workshops, I was also enrolled in the Open Design Master's program, trying to figure out what to do for my thesis project. I thought, okay, I'm obviously interested in history and storytelling and these new digital tools for creative writing. So if history is mainly narrative, what if we could retell it using these new digital tools? So during my last years of studies, I moved to Berlin, and Berlin was like anything I expected. There was graffiti everywhere, demonstrations, people dressed in the most unconventional ways, and during the nights, lights and music would come out of abandoned buildings. But also, with time, I noticed the subtle scars of its divided past, visible not only in memorials, but also in random little encounters, in conversations with people, even in the transport system. This captivated my attention deeply and made me go deep into the city's history. At some point, it all came together: history, digital storytelling, and Berlin. And I knew I wanted to design a narrative game about this city. As a historian, my first instinct was to read everything. Especially, I read about the Cold War years and the aftermath of the reunification. One of my main sources were photo books, which provided me with vivid imagery of the city before and after the wall came down. But the more I read, the more overwhelmed I felt. I just thought, I cannot become an expert on this topic overnight. And more importantly, how can I, as an outsider, retell the history of a city I wasn't even born in? So that's where I realized I had to stop being an expert, trying to become an academic expert, or trying to discover some new kind of historical discovery. And instead, I turned my focus to what intrigued me the most. I thought back to my Twine workshops, and while imagining an interactive fiction about Berlin's history, suddenly things clicked. I was picturing this narrative where it would hop between past and present constantly. And while imagining this, things took a personal dimension. After all, I had experienced so much in Berlin, both good and not so nice. A feeling of belonging and not belonging at all. Something inside me told me, you have to talk about all of this. And this is how Berlin Passages was born. So, once the concept was clear, I moved into the design process, which unfolded in three main parts. First, writing the plot. Secondly, experimenting with Twine. And secondly, refining my method. I began by writing down a fictionalized version of my experience in Berlin and looked for ways to whip down historical anecdotes and connections. For this, I used Figma as a visual interface, and I identified eight themes that became the chapters of the narrative. Then I moved to Twine, where I started to explore how players would interact with the story, what choices they make, and how videos, images, and other kind of media could deepen the experience. And as I progressed, I gradually defined a tone, a visual style, and a methodical workflow, which consisted in the next steps. First, I would draft each chapter, its text, and its visual content using Figma again. Then I would import it to Twine to create the interactive structure. And lastly, I would add the media elements, such as videos, GIFs, images, and even Spotify playlists. Then I would reflect on my process, test it, sleep, eat, Twine, and repeat the process for the next chapter until I have the final result. Berlin Passages, a pretty substantial piece of interactive fiction consisting of 8 chapters, each taking about 15 to 30 minutes to read, totaling in about 2.5 hours of experience. If I had to describe it in one sentence, Berlin Passages is a historical interactive autofiction that tells the story of my move to Berlin as a young design student. As I bike through parks, ride the S-Bahn, and explore hidden corners of the city, you, the player, begin to uncover pieces of Berlin's history. You'll also follow my connection with an Aussie, someone from East Berlin whose lived experience opens new ways of understanding the city's split identity and the roots of the techno scene. Throughout the game, the reader goes through various immersive moments, choosing where to go and what to discover. Here, for example, you guide me through the Friedrichshain and Kreuzberg Museum. You choose what exhibits to visit and read the museum's displays and my own notes about Kreuzberg's squatting movement. Then you can decide to read more in the library or just go on with the story. In another chapter, I'm walking with my partner through Ernst Thälmann Park. In this massive residential space built by the GDR, you choose where to go next. Maybe you go to the planetarium, just take a walk, or just get home. Depending on what you choose, you uncover different pieces of the site's history. Dialogue between characters reveal history in a light and even humorous way. Other times you read my thoughts directly, where the tone becomes more reflective, nostalgic, or even critical. At the same time, interactivity itself becomes more expressive. Let me show you a small example. In this passage about Berlin's techno scene, you see bright, colorful words such as joy, music, connection. But as you click them, they turn into their darker counter side, such as excess, hedonism, narcissism. It's a pretty simple mechanic, but it delivers a powerful message of how a scene that grew out of the desire of freedom changed with time. Speaking of techno, there's a part I call the club navigation minigame. This was one of the most challenging parts to build and where I truly explored the potential of branching narratives. In this game, you can live that game-like experience of a night out in Berlin. You choose a club, go there, wait in line, face a bouncer. Will he let you in or not? Or perhaps you just go home to some other place. And depending on how great or disastrous your experience is, you will receive a final score. Of course, this can simply be a fun little side game, but in the context of Berlin's history, it raises deeper questions. Who gets access to culture? What does inclusion mean in spaces like this? Is it only about partying, or is there more meaning to it? So Berlin Passages wasn't just a design experiment. It became a space for lyrical and historical expression. Through Twine, I explored how color, pacing, and interactivity could shape a story. And as a historian, I engaged with non-traditional media and was able to connect with non-academic readers. But of course, there were challenges. At first, I was worried that my game might be too personal. Balancing the personal aspect with the historical was challenging. But feedback showed me that the personal actually helped the historical make more relatable. Another problem was that the game was a bit too long for many. In trying to craft a story that was rich and also included a critical perspective in history, I ended up compromising the game's accessibility and engagement. But that only means there's more to work on. In the end, Berlin Passages stands as a very promising prototype with a lot of potential to grow. So where to go from here? On one path, I would like to refine the current version. This could mean shortening some sections, adding bookmark features, or direct links to historical sources, or also enhancing its visual design. But what actually excites me even more is to outgrow the Berlin Passages project and explore new ways of retelling history. For this, I envision creating Twine workshops for history students, where they can explore the interrelation between research and creativity to create their own interactive stories. And that leads me to one of the best parts of this whole process, the Twine community. Through this project, I discovered a vibrant group of creators, academics, designers, and activists, all using Twine as a powerful tool for independent expression. Because for sure, this was a very personal project. But in doing it, I realized something, that I'm part of Berlin's histories too, and that my perspective as an Ausländer, as a Mexican historian, and as a creative is also valuable. And most importantly, the project encouraged me to invite people to participate, because at its heart, Berlin Passages is a story about connection. Whether it's in the East or West, in squads, raves, or clubs, it's about how history and culture bring people together. After all, history is not something separate in the past that we just study. It's about how we live and how we relate to one another. And in this sense, it's really similar to play. Because in the end, history as play, it's human. So, yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And if you want to explore the game by yourselves, there are these two links. The first one is my original prototype, and the second one is what I uploaded for the showcase here in NarraScope in Itch.io. So yeah, I don't know if we have time for questions, but yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe I check out here in Discord too.
Doesn't have any questions in the Discord.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a whole story, right? I mean, it wasn't like linear. It wasn't like one day I was like, yeah, just stop history and start doing game design. I entered this program, Open Design, that is, as the name says, it's pretty open. It's pretty broad. It's about design in general, and there I contacted a professor specialized in game design because I was at the same time I was in this program, I was doing these Twine workshops and was really fascinated by Twine. Like it really opened up my mind. And I just thought like this kind of makes sense with this history background I have. So that is like how it's been going. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the narrative part is actually how I connected it and how one thing took me to the next, I think. Yeah. Um, an FMV game. Um, I don't know what that is. I mean, let me. Yeah, maybe can you explain further? FMV game. Mm-hmm. An inter. It's an entirely video-based game where you click and interact with the video. Okay. Full motion video. Okay, okay. Well, no, actually, I haven't thought about that. I think my background is more as a writer, historian slash writer. So, like for me, that's more like the easiest medium for me to work on. But I mean, I've also done some video editing, and I like it, and I think it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, can also communicate a lot, simply videos and without using words. So yeah, I mean, would be a very interesting area to explore. Thank you for presenting it to me. Okay.
When you were presenting parts of the Twine, a lot of them seemed very adventure game influence, like go east, go west, like traverses. When you were specifically working with something that's rooted in a place, I was wondering how you balance the idea of covering the entirety of, say, Berlin versus this very specific exploration.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a challenge, especially when I started like researching the history and like trying to figure out what to do the game about. Yeah, like I mean, it was very quick. Like in the design process, I got into this like, okay, I want to do something in Twine, and I kind of got close, but then like, okay, then exploring again, like all the history, then it got open again. And yeah, the way to kind of condense everything was in the end my own plot line, which is the part of like, okay, I lived this in Berlin, and there I weaved in the historical information like as branching storylines, like kind of side quests you can explore, but like the main storyline was the one that guided the whole narrative. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's a good one. Um, well, yeah, I mean, definitely there's a natural connection with history and games. No? There's so many games nowadays that use history as a topic or as an inspiration. So, so yeah, I mean, I think it would also be a possibility. I just have to think further on like how would I structure a course like of history for game designers. But yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
This, when you're saying about
how history itself is a narrative,
Mhm.
like a collaborative kind of how are we agreeing what this story is type of process.
Okay. Well, yeah. mm, yeah, actually, I mean, before Berlin Passages, because my topic was, okay, how do I combine history with game design? But like also, how would that serve the historian or any other audience to like think more like a historian, right? Or to really think, okay, we are also participants in history. That was kind of the objective. And yeah, I mean, before Berlin Passages, I came up with some idea that involved some kind of archive. And like, okay, in some kind of player environment would be to like capture different pieces of history through that archive and try to reconstruct it and like see how the way you organize all the information differently can create different narratives and different perspectives of the past. But yeah, that is like a completely pretty ambitious and would be another project, right? Regarding Berlin Passages, I don't know. I mean, I also think maybe it's one of the counter sides of Berlin Passages, or one of the things I've considered that could be improved, is that it's a pretty linear game. I mean, there's a bit of branching, but you always come back to the main storyline, and there's like a beginning and an end. Maybe it would be interesting to explore, to give more agency to the players, right? And like let them, okay, just construct a complete new story. I mean, that would be something I would like to see and explore too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone else is writing. Okay, really basic stuff like using primary. Yeah, exam. Yeah, that's definitely one that we could use. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, did you write Berlin Passages from what you learned while you were in Berlin? Was there anything you learned about Berlin as you made your game? So what insights went in that came out of your design process that weren't things that you knew that you brought to the project?
Okay. I mean, you mean what things I knew before the
Did you
project?
learn
Or? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the takeouts of the project. Like, yeah, like for me it was like, I mean, I'm a historian as a undergraduate, and like the whole process of, okay, how I develop a research project as for a paper or whatever, versus, okay, I'm researching the history of Berlin for the game, for creating a game. Like the process is so much different and so much more creative, and I think that was for me like the what I really enjoyed about this experience. And I don't know, just to put some examples, thanks to this project, I think I learned more about I had this notion of the East and West Berlin, and how like the difference, and how life developed differently in both spaces. But like through the game, I was able to really get into it more, and like find it in very unexpected places. Like an example I always put is the transport system in Berlin, because I just became fascinated by that. It's on one side there are only like streetcars, and the other side there are mostly buses, and that was because the city was divided. And it's that kind of stuff like that people are like living there, and then most people don't know that history, right? And I mean, yeah, I think for me that's I kind of like, it was more kind of exploratory, the way in which I research history here, than how I would have done for like a historical research traditionally. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, yeah. I consulted Jeremiah McCall for my thesis. Okay, some non-digital game that might be of interest. Tracking either. So,
I wanted to just say that I really enjoy your game. I used to live in Berlin, and so all of the places that it's like, yeah. And I also became absolutely fascinated with the difference between East and West, and like the difference in the public transit, and the fact that the street lights are different. And
Yeah.
So you get a different color of light depending on if you're in the East or the West.
Yeah. It's there's so much to look up on that. Yeah. I thank you. I'm very happy you liked. Okay.